Good morning. It is Saturday, August 19th at about 5:15 in the morning. My name is Larry Cedar. I'm back with you for another session on what I'm now calling exactly what it is, which is expansion. Expansion is the incremental release of muscular tension to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. I'll say it again. Expansion is the incremental release of muscular tension going from this to this to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. That's all we're doing. So I've been thinking a little bit about these sessions and why do them. And I have to just say that what I've concluded is that this is an experiment of sorts for me. It's a practice based on a theory by a man named Thaddeus Golis, who wrote a book called The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment. Small little 70-so page volume you can pick up anywhere. It's a great read, which proclaims that the two basic processes of the universe are contraction, squeeze your hands together, that coming together of ideas, thoughts, materials, concepts, efforts, dreams, pursuits, and the opposite, which is expansion, letting go. Let go of your hands and drop them to your sides. Letting go, releasing, going to nothingness, emptiness, and that everything in the universe vacillates between those two processes, contraction, expansion, contraction, expansion. Everything is an alternation. And we vacillate between those two states as well. And if you begin to look at life through that prism, where everything you see, think, do, experience is either in a state of contraction or expansion or vacillating between the two, moving in one direction or another, you begin to analyze yourself in that way and begin to, expanded moment, determine where you are on that spectrum at any given moment in your day, your life. Am I more contracted or expanded? So, both being necessary parts of the universe, we alternate between the two, and what we want is a balance. That's called being centered. Where we run into problems, I guess you might say, and the simplest way to describe that is by saying, I feel bad. When you feel bad, when you know something's off or wrong, you don't feel good, you don't feel at peace with the world, there's a very good chance that you are overly contracted. So what we're doing with this process, which is simply expansion, is using the muscular release, incremental muscular release, to move us into a more expanded state so that we can come to a place of being centered and balanced. So this is to be simply put, an experiment for me in my life to determine if that's true, and to see that if I pursue these techniques, if I can bring my own life into balance. My experience has been that it has worked. And I continue to do it on a daily basis, experiment with it, if you will. And I continue to share it because I've been thinking about this. I think my desire is that by sharing it with others and hearing from them and getting their feedback that this is true, that I will then be able to confirm this process, which makes me even more motivated to pursue it. I think that's what's going on here, because there's no reason really for me to do these sessions. I can practice on my own all I want, and I do. But I think in a way I'm just trying to share this to see if it's true. And if others say to me, yes, this works, this is real, that's more confirmation and more motivation for me to continue to pursue it in my life. And I've had some good feedback, and I think it is true. That all said, let's begin. Contraction and expansion. What we're going to do in these sessions is what we always do, move ourselves from a contracted state into a more expanded state. Now, what does it mean to be in a contracted state? Physical tension, emotional obsession, thoughts, worries, concerns, overthinking, emotional rigidity, feeling constrained somehow emotionally. These are all contracted states. Again, generally speaking, when you're overly contracted, you feel bad. To be contracted in and of itself is not bad. That's how we achieve things. That's how we get things done, by contracting, coming up with an idea, pursuing that through physical action, bringing thoughts, materials, ideas, people together to advance that agenda. That's fantastic. It's when we're overly contracted, we're out of balance, that we get into problems. So we're going to work in this session to practice the techniques that bring us into a more expanded state, and thus into a state of balance or centered. So that's enough talking. Talking is a contraction. I try to do as little as possible in these sessions, but there I go. We start these sessions with what I call the preliminary steps, and that is simply deep breaths followed by stillness and silence. Deep breaths are expansive by nature. You're filling your lungs. When you're contracted, you tend to hold your breath. So it's a very fundamental, basic way to begin to nudge the dial towards expansion. Followed by stillness and silence. Stillness is the opposite of activity, which is a decision to do. So stillness takes us into a more expanded state. And silence, again, the elimination of words, thoughts, obsessions, ideas. Silence. These are all slightly gentle, expanded steps, expansive steps. So let's start with 3 deep breaths, followed by 15 seconds of absolute stillness and silence. And I always emphasize absolute stillness. It's something we rarely do in life, to just freeze. And it sometimes feels unusual if you're watching someone do it. It seems strange because we're always in motion. So when you take that step to just stop moving, it sends a message to your body and your very soul that we have stopped doing. And so again, moving ourselves into a more expanded state. And silence, the same. Stop thinking. Now your mind might continue to race, but again, we're nudging ourselves. You can't just instantly become expanded. We nudge ourselves. So here we go. 3 deep breaths, followed by 15 seconds of absolute stillness and silence. Here we go. You've already expanded. And the deepest yet. 15 seconds, absolute stillness and silence, but continue to breathe. Deep breath. So now we've begun. And it's that simple. And I emphasize the word simple because this technique is designed for simplicity. It should be available at any time of the day, any time of the night, at no cost, and very little effort. And it's important that you recognize how simple it is, because that means it's accessible. When we're contracted, we tend to hold on. So it can be daunting to stop, not move, take a breath, and sit in stillness and silence, because that means letting go of our contracted process, which is what we rely on so much to get us through the day and night. Thinking, worrying, holding, keeping it together, getting it together. So we're stopping that now. So that can be daunting, but the actual process is very simple. Take a deep breath, sit in stillness and silence. Let's continue. 5 deep breaths, followed by 30 seconds of absolute stillness and silence. And again, we are nudging the dial into a more expanded place. 5 deep breaths, 30 seconds, absolute stillness and silence. Here we go. Last one, deepest breath still. 30 seconds, absolute stillness and silence. Deep breath. So in thinking about it this morning, what I determined that these sessions are less of a class, and they're more of a journal, I guess you might say, for myself. I'm just keeping a record of this process. I'm sort of confirming how the process works and checking to see how it works. And again, with the hope for intent that other people benefit from it as well, which is a confirmation of sorts that there is some value to the technique. So if these sessions are of value to you, I'm thrilled. But again, this is something that works for me. We're all completely unique individuals. We have similarities in terms of bodies and psychologies and so forth, but basically we all have a completely unique experience of the world. But I do think there's a commonality in this process, and I'm hoping that it resonates for you as well. So now we're going to extend that process even further. We're going to take 7 deep breaths, followed by a full 60 seconds of absolute stillness and silence. And it's important you begin to note, how does this feel? Are you feeling a little better? Are you feeling a little more still, a little more calm, a little more expanded? Do you feel that your mind has somewhat quieted, that your body is more relaxed, that you are more comfortable in a chair? Do you have a heightened consciousness of the room and just a sense of being? This is moving into an expanded state. So check for those signs and see if anything's changed. Again, we try not to be too result-oriented here, because results are a contracted process. I want to see a result. I want to create something and see that I did it. That sense of accomplishment is a contracted process, again, of great value in our lives. But when we're trying to expand, you might note if those feelings of compulsion are dissipating and you're feeling a sense of nothingness. So check for that. See if that's happening. That's what it does for me, and hopefully it does that for you as well. 7 deep breaths, followed by a full minute of absolute stillness and silence. 7 deep breaths, expansive breaths, followed by a full minute of absolute stillness and silence. And really concentrate on trying not to move a muscle. Continue to breathe. There's that mechanism continuing. In fact, you're going to want to perhaps even breathe more and more deeply. Let that happen, but don't move. It sends a signal to your body that we have stopped doing. 7 deep breaths, full minute of absolute stillness and silence. Here we go. Three more. Last one. Full minute, absolute stillness and silence. Deep breath. So, on its most fundamental level, deep breaths, stillness, and silence are all you need to practice this technique. And you can continue doing this for 15 minutes, a half an hour, and just again note the changes. Note the changes. You're trying to build a consciousness of that shift from contraction to expansion. Squeeze your hands together, squeeze, contraction, release, expansion. You're trying to build a heightened consciousness of what it feels like to expand, to let go. We have a very strong consciousness of what it is to contract, to get up, to do, to make, to think, to write, to speak. We're very familiar with that as our go-to solution in life, to the point that it can get us in trouble, because at that very moment when we are overly contracted, rather than letting go and expanding, we will think more. We will worry more. And we forget that there's an alternate solution, which is the exact opposite. Think less, do nothing. So again, this is an experiment. It's been an experiment for me for several years now. And I continue to play with it and toy with it and share it, because the longer I do it, the more I do it, the more validation I find in the fact that it works. And again, I share it with you in hopes that it will work for you, and I will receive further confirmation that this is something that works. Now, you might say, well, confirmation. That's a contractive process. You're absolutely right. And I thought 1,000 times how I should stop talking about this, because I'm basically trying to validate something, which is a contractive process. In an expanded state, there's nothing that needs validation. Nothing matters. You just exist. But I'm human, and I'm curious, and I have a desire to share. So I'm following that very human impulse. So there's nothing wrong with that. But experiment for yourself. That's the whole idea, is that you should begin to experiment with this process yourself. Sitting, deep breaths, stillness, and silence. Deep breaths, stillness, and silence. Expand. Begin to see what that does for you. Note the change. Now, I'll be honest with you. Last night, as frequently happens with me, I woke up in a total panic about a particular issue, which is, in my life, which is no different than anyone else deals with. And I was obsessing on it and panicking and worried and contracting in a very contracted state. Thinking, what should I do? Needless to say, it's impossible to sleep in that state. And I knew I had to get sleep. I had to get back to sleep. So I did what I frequently do now, which is what I always do. Deep breaths, stillness and silence, and what follows next, which is what I call the nuts and bolts of the technique, which is muscular release. Now, to jump ahead, I will tell you it took at least a half an hour of doing this to calm myself down. But once I got to that place where I had expanded, the worrisome thoughts had dissipated. The problem was still there. I want to be very clear. This doesn't make issues or problems or challenges go away. But I had a perspective that allowed me to look at it in a very calm way and think, well, what do I need to do? Well, in the morning, when I wake up, I will take this step, and this step, and start to deal with that problem. But I was looking at it from a calmer place, and I was able to go back to sleep. That's what we need. We need to be able to center ourselves when we're overly contracted, to go from an overly contracted place to a more expanded place till we're centered, and we can more effectively and calmly and joyfully deal with our life. Okay, so after you've done deep breaths, stillness, and silence, we move into, as I said, the nuts and bolts of the technique. And I've gone quite a bit today on the preliminary technique, so I won't spend quite as much time on the nuts and bolts, but I will talk about it. And you are encouraged to experiment with this yourself. Again, I'll speak from personal experience. This process can be daunting because what it involves is letting go. If the contracted process teaches us that to solve our problems and to face our life, we need to keep it together, hold tight, get it together, hang on, think, do, work. It's very difficult to let go of that habit, which is an ingrained habit, and say, well, let's try something different. Let's let go. Let's release. Let's open up. Let's do nothing. Let's empty our minds. Let's come to a place of clarity, silence, peace, because that is a solution of equal value, but we are habitually trained through experience to contract. We're trying to teach ourselves to go to expansion as a solution. And again, habits are hard to break. I've spent the past, I don't know how many years now, working on this technique, and still, I know now for a fact that it works. But even so, every time I go to start, I don't want to do it, because my contractive mind, my contractive being is holding on to thoughts, worries, concerns. My body is physically tense, holding on as a means to protect myself from these fears. So I have to gradually, slowly nudge myself into an expanded state. There's the initial discomfort, panic, resistance, but as you move further and further, you start to sense that it's okay. Not only is it okay, but it's better and it works. And then you come to a place of peace and quiet and stillness. So I just encourage you to practice and experiment with this. Just always work on it whenever you can. Again, I've done this for years. I know the value of it. I can still only get myself to do it an hour, maybe 2 hours a day. And I spend the rest of the day doing what everyone does. Thinking, working, doing, going on the internet, reading pointless stories to distract myself. I'm a human being. But I know enough now to pull back from that at least an hour, maybe 2 a day, and it has helped me achieve a sort of balance. So, muscular release. We began this session by saying expansion is the incremental release of muscular tension to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. The muscles are a fantastic tool for bringing yourself into an expanded state. Because when you release a muscle, when you go from this, squeeze your fist, to this, let go, 3, 2, 1, release, you've expanded. Muscles can only contract or release. They can't do both at the same time. When you release some muscular tension, when you release a particular muscle's tension, you've expanded, you've stopped contracting. So it's a way of nudging ourselves into an expanded state, just as the breaths and stillness and silence are. The muscles, though, it's very, very powerful. If you can begin to release muscular tension, you can transform your very being, because it sends a signal to your body, your mind, your soul, that you are expanding. We do it incrementally because it's very easy to move something this far. It's much more challenging to move it this far. So we do very simple. We start by squeezing our hands together. Tight, 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 3, 2, 1, and release. Now that's muscular release. You've just experienced it. Now we're going to go through our body. I used to call this technique scanning, because what we were going to do is scan our body for pockets of muscular tension and release that muscular tension incrementally. And we tend to carry a certain degree of muscular tension with us every minute of the day. When you do these scanning sessions, you may be surprised to find how much you've been holding on. So we start with the face. On my count, release all the muscular tension in your face that you can. And look in the mirror if it helps, because you'll see it happen. 3, 2, 1, and release. That drooping sensation, that letting go, that is incremental muscular release. Note that feeling. And pat yourself on the back because you did it. Now we're going to do that 10, 20, 100, 1,000 times. We're going to gently nudge our body into a released state. The muscles will guide our body into that state. The conscious decision to release is the technique. The mind, the brain, is a muscle of sorts that holds onto thoughts, ideas. And as you begin to expand physically, it will affect your brain. Your brain will begin to let go. And those thoughts that you've been holding on so tightly to will simply float away. And you'll come to this place of stillness, silence, and emptiness. It's a process. Be patient with yourself, but it works. The face, 3, 2, 1, and release. Good. So that's all we're doing. So I encourage you to explore your own body and take a part of your body and say, can I release 1% of 1% of the muscular tension in that muscle? And try it. So we go to zone 2, the top of the head. 3, 2, 1, and release. Did you feel it? It's important that you make note. I felt that. I felt myself go from this to this, from this to this, from this to this. That change, that slight incremental muscular release is the process, and it will guide you. It's like you've hired a Sherpa to take you up Mount Everest. That process will guide you to a place of stillness and quiet and calm. I've done it thousands of times. It works for me. I'm hoping it works for you and anyone else who's interested as a means of finding peace and joy and calm. And this is my record of that journey. Zone 3, the back of the head. 3, 2, 1, and release. Did you feel it? It's important that you pay attention to that change. The face, 3, 2, 1, and release. Top of the head, 3, 2, 1, and release. The back of the head, 3, 2, 1, and release. Take a deep breath. All we're doing, it's very, very simple. All we're doing is moving the dial from a contracted place to a more expanded place until we are centered. Zone 4, the neck, 3, 2, 1, and release. Now, I will spend a half an hour doing this. I always feel bad during these sessions because I move through these fairly quickly. Because this is, as I said, a journal of sorts, a confirmation of this process. But take as much time as you can or want to explore this. Not always a comfortable process. Again, you're letting go. It's as if you have someone holding onto a lifesaver in the middle of the ocean, and you've got a boat, and you say, come on the boat, I'll save you. And they don't want to let go of that lifesaver because they've been holding on to it. This is the way they've been staying afloat in the ocean. And you say, you've got to let go of the lifesaver. Just let go of the lifesaver, and I'll bring you on the boat. And they're going, I don't want to. Well, that's what's happening with your body. You don't want to let go of this muscular tension. It's your security blanket. It's your defense system. These thoughts, the muscular tension, these are all an instinctive, habitual reaction to the challenges of life. So if you feel resistance, now it's crossed my mind that, again, this works for me. This may be my experience of it. But I sense that it's true for a lot of people. So just experiment for yourself and see. Daniel, you're welcome. Thank you. Zone 4, the neck, 3, 2, 1, and release. The neck, 3, 2, 1, and release. I snap the fingers because it's an indication of a flipping of the switch, you might say, a power switch. When I snap, the power goes off to those muscles and they let go. Look at my hand, 3, 2, 1, and power, energy was holding my hand up. 3, 2, 1, and release. I turned off the power and it just became a sagging, released, relaxed muscle, which had no function or purpose other than to be. It wasn't doing anything. That's why I say the muscles are such a great guide, because they're a metaphor for what you're trying to do. Your muscles are trying, they're making an effort, and you're saying, stop trying, just be. And then you're just flesh and bones, existing. So the muscles are teaching you where to go. Zone 5, the shoulders, 3, 2, 1, and release, let them drop. Take a deep breath. I've tried to distill this down to a few simple processes. Deep breaths, stillness and silence, muscular release. Done. If I had to write a book on this technique, it would be half a page. And that's to make it accessible and available. There should be nothing challenging about using this technique other than doing it. It's accessible, free, available to anyone, everywhere in the universe. All you're doing is exploring the very process of the universe that Thaddeus Goles describes, moving between a contracted and expanded state. But you're building your consciousness of it so that you can choose where on that spectrum you want to be, rather than being tossed by life, the tempestuous seas of life, without any sense of control and grasping at things to try to help you become centered or feel better. Drugs, alcohol, anything, even the healthy ones, chiropractors, masseuses, therapists, all these things we grasp at to try to become centered. Rather than do that, you build the consciousness that you have within you, this tool that can bring you to center. And it's very empowering to know that, because then no matter what happens in your life, even if you can't always achieve a sense of calm, you know there's something that will help get you at least more centered. And when you carry that in your pocket, you go through life feeling a little less concerned, because you have the power to heal yourself. Zone 5, the shoulders, 3, 2, 1, let them drop. Zone 6, the chest, stomach, in front of the waist. I call this the plate of armor, because all these are defense mechanisms. All this muscular holding is a defense mechanism. And we grab, we protect, we tense up to protect ourselves. So it's a plate of armor that we're just trying to take off so that we can just be. Zone 6, chest, stomach, front of the waist, 3, 2, 1, and release. And moving quickly into the next, because I want to keep this at about a half an hour. Down the back and into the waist and pelvis, all important pelvis, 3, 2, 1, and release. If contraction is a holding, a clenching, then expansion is a letting go, a release. Dropping your armor, dropping your defense mechanisms, exposing yourself in a way to the world, which is what makes it so frightening. Expansion is that you feel vulnerable, you feel unprotected. We have a lot of psychological weaponry and armory that we use to protect ourselves, a lot of physical weaponry and armory we use to protect ourselves. We're dropping all of that. In an expanded state, there is no protection. There are no structures between us and life. We've completely exposed ourselves as human beings. And you might say, well, that's frightening and dangerous, but at the same time, it's actually safer, because with that vulnerability comes an awareness, a heightened awareness of the world around you. Your thoughts, are not clouded by worries or concerns. You see with great clarity. Your body is not inhibited by the tensions that come with physical fear. You're available. If you had to, say, defend yourself, you respond much more quickly because your body is relaxed. A relaxed muscle is a responsive, effective muscle. A tense muscle, as we all know, restrains you. So even though it feels dangerous to move into an expanded state, you're actually moving yourselves into a safer place because you are much more capable of dealing with whatever comes your way. You're much more aware. The most aware state you can be in is an expanded state. You're not judging. You're not seeing things through the prism of your worries or concerns. You're seeing things for what they are with absolute clarity. And you all know people like that who seem to just deal with problems so simply. They're calm, centered, they're Zen-like because they have clarity. They're not walking into a situation with preconceived notions or ideas about what they'll need to do or what's coming at them or may come at them. They're walking in and going, let's see what this is. You know, they say the advanced martial artist can easily dodge punches because he's not worrying about how do I hit or what's going to happen if I hit. They're just waiting and watching. And they see the other person swinging the moment that person starts. So they have plenty of time to move aside and let that fist go by them. So you're building a sense of clarity. Zone 7, down the back, past the waist and into the pelvis. 3, 2, 1, and feel that muscular release. Take a deep breath. One more. And finally, zone 8, down the legs, across the knees, and into the feet. Focus on your feet. What we're doing again with this process is building a heightened consciousness of our state of being. Focus on your feet and see if on the count of 3 you can let go even the slightest amount of muscular tension. 3, 2, 1, and release. 3, 2, 1, and release. And what's interesting about muscular release is it allows you to feel. Because the muscles are holding to protect us against having to feel. We're so afraid of feeling because there's so much emotion going on in us. When you relax a muscle, frequently you will feel something. That's scary. But a freed feeling is a harmless feeling. A held feeling is dangerous. It can really take you off course. And we all know that. If you've ever done any therapy at all, those thoughts and feelings that you hide and bury and just try to keep down are the ones that can really take you off course in life. Once you've exposed them and let them fly free, they're harmless. And you, again, have more clarity. So I say that because when I have to release tension, when I try to release tension in my feet, I feel nervous because there's a tingling. 3, 2, 1, and the feet, release. And I go, oh, feeling. And that can be unsettling because we've been working so hard to hold in those feelings. So just a reminder of the sort of things you might experience as you work on this expansive process. Take a deep breath. So that has been a half an hour. I try to keep these sessions to a half an hour, not to bore you to death. And all it is, again, I got to be honest, it's a journal for myself, but it's a way of sharing this technique to try to confirm, to explore it, and to confirm its effectiveness. With every passing day that I practice it, I believe more strongly in its effectiveness. It's not to say it's easy. I find it just as challenging to start expanding today as I did when I first started this several years ago. What's different is now I know that when I have that feeling of resistance, I don't need to listen to that. Yeah, I feel it. Yeah, I'm scared. I'm uncomfortable letting go, releasing muscular tension, dropping my guard. But I know that on the other side of that expansive process is a place of peace and joy and calm that is worth pursuing. I'm human. I'm contracted by nature. I worry. I think. I need to achieve. I will always do that for the rest of my life, God willing, because I'm trying to be successful in life. And that requires work, thought, effort, contraction. That's how we make a life for ourselves. But what I'm also trying to do now with this process in particular is have a balanced life where I'm not all about contraction. That isn't always the solution. There's an equal solution, and that is expansion. And so that I can come to a place of balance, of being centered, and that's the goal. So take a note. We've only done a little bit of this. I encourage you to do it as much as you can. I keep a journal just to kind of remind myself to do it every day because I tend to avoid it. My contractive self does not want to let go. But explore it for yourself and see what it does for you. And remember, no matter how contracted you feel, no matter how convinced you feel that, well, this is what the contracted voice says, this doesn't work, I don't like how this feels, this doesn't feel good, I don't want to do this, I'd much rather contract, nothing's going to help the way I feel, this is impossible, what a waste of time, all those contracted thoughts. See them, accept them for what they are, and move past them, using these simple tools, deep breaths, stillness and silence, and in particular, the incremental release of muscular tension. These steps will guide you into a more expanded state, and you can take it as far as you like. And that's it for today. Take a deep breath. 15 seconds, stillness and silence. Deep breath. See how you feel. See you next time. Bye.